Welcome to Death, Lies, and Alibis. I'm your host, Christy, and this is the podcast that dives deep into the dark and eerie world of local cold cases. We're in New Straitsville, a small, lovely town nestled in the heart of Ohio. It's a place with tight-knit neighborhoods, friendly faces, and a sense of security you'd expect from any small town. But beneath this idyllic surface lies a hidden darkness, a collection of unanswered questions that has lingered over the years. So grab your headphones, lock your doors, and be prepared to enter a world where the truth has invaded justice. Hi folks, welcome to the podcast. If you're a returning listener, welcome. I'm glad you're here. And if you're new, welcome. I hope you stick around till the end. All right, so today I want to tell you all about a little spot tucked away in the rolling hills of Perry County. It's called New Straitsville. Now, don't blank, because you might miss it. Technically, it's a village with fewer than 800 folks living there. It's one of those places where if you don't know somebody, it's okay, just wait, because you're about to. Strangers don't stay strangers for long there. Life's a little bit slower, and there's this charm, like a sweetness, that just hangs in the air. Now, I want to tell you about the history for a minute. Back in the day, this place was all about coal mining. The coal mines were everything, huge industries. People came from all over to work in the mines. Now, I grew up and I went to school around here. This is my old stomping grounds. Actually, there are 4 small villages tucked in between the hills and the crazy curves in Perry County. Besides Straitsville, there's Shawnee, and then there's Corning, and then the last is Moxie or Moxahala. We all had different grade schools. They went up to grade 7, and then we all went to one big high school called Miller. Go Falcons! You know what? I am so happy and I feel so blessed to be raised around there. It was a simple, exciting, back road fun. It was just so fun. It was a slow country life with the close-knit communities and where you can depend on your neighbors. Okay, back to the story. These days, New Straitsville has a whole new claim to fame. They proudly wear the badge of Moonshine Capital of the World. Yes, it's a real thing, and you heard that right. I said moonshine. Now, they're not shy about it either. We're very proud of our Appalachian heritage. We really are. Now, every May, they celebrate the Moonshine Festival. That's like taking a trip back in time, folks. People celebrate like it's the good old days, and the whole county turns out for it. I'll make sure we get some pictures up on about the festival. I'll put some past and present up. It'll be on our Facebook group, so you can check it out. Now, let me tell you, the folks there are solid, real down-to-earth people. They're all about God, families, and their community. And if something bad happens, it doesn't matter who you are. They're showing up, no questions asked, and they're just ready to help out. But hey, just because it's a small town doesn't mean, they don't have any secrets, right? Everybody has them, and when those secrets finally come out, well, they hit hard, no matter where you live. So on September 18th, 2017, the peace that Straitsville was known for, well, it was shattered in an instant. And that's the day they found Amy Jo Nelson, 39 years old, a mother, a daughter, and a sister, dead in her apartment. And let me tell you, it wasn't just the family that was wrecked and shocked by this. Her death sent shockwaves through the entire community. People don't forget stuff like that around here. Now, Amy was tough, like I'm talking seriously tough, stronger than most folks could even begin to understand. I'm talking real here, real talk. She was the kind of woman who could just about handle anything life threw her way. But someone, in the most violent and selfish way, they stole her life from her. And honestly, it doesn't sit right. It hasn't since the day it happened. You know what I mean? From the jump, there was something off about the whole situation. The way it went down just never added up. So, listen, if we're really going to get to the bottom of what happened to Amy, we're going to have to rewind a bit here and look back at her life. Where she came from, what she went through. Only then can we start piecing together why someone would do this to her. Amy's story is one of pure resilience. She was all about her family, no matter what. They always came first to her, no matter how tough things got. Honestly, I'd call her a true warrior. But here's the thing, and I hate to say it, but But even the strongest people, well, they're not immune to the darkness of this world and what it can bring. Because it can creep in, and it does, little by little, and before you even realize it, it starts to take over your life. And with Amy, that darkness claimed her in a way that, honestly, it's just hard to talk about. It hits me hard because she didn't deserve this. Didn't deserve any of it. But it's too important not to talk about. Her story needs to be heard. Okay, so let's go back a little to where it all started for Amy, her early life. It was like one of those stories you hear about, but you don't think it could actually be true. Now, she was born into a family that was the definition of close-knit. I know that sounds corny, but it's true. Amy was the firstborn to Pam and Pete Nelson, and they were a couple that everybody looked up to. They fell in love back in high school, and that love only got stronger and stronger over the years. They have that kind of love that most of us dream about. They're inseparable, and they are totally devoted for the family. And everyone in town admires them for how they have stuck together through thick and thin. And it wasn't just Amy and their 3 daughters that made up the family. They took in Allie. Now, she was a foster child, and they raised her like one of their own. She became as much part of the Nelson family, and they poured the same kind of love and support into her as they did with their other girls. You know, that kind of closeness isn't something everybody gets to experience, but the Nelsons truly lived it. Now, Pete, he was one of those hard-working guys who never backed down from getting his hands dirty. He spent most of his career building oil field equipment, and when it was time for a change, he went to work at Goodyear. He didn't slow down one bit. And Pam, she wasn't just a nurse. She also ran with the local emergency squad. Now, both of them, they worked their tails off. They made sure that their family was taken care of while they stayed active in their community. They were the kind of family that, well, they knew what hard work meant, and they stuck together. And then there was Amy, with her golden hair and, oh, those piercing blue eyes. She wasn't just beautiful, though. She had this warmth about her that you could feel, and she sent off those good vibes. You know the type of person I mean. Whether you're family or a stranger, she made you feel like you belonged. That's just who she was. She had this way of making everyone feel welcome. She never met a stranger. Her sister Abby just loves talking about their childhood, how it was full of laughter and love. And the Nelsons, they weren't just a family. They were like a solid, unbreakable team. Now, if all of this hasn't said enough about them, let me share this little gem of a story with you. It cracks me up every time I think about it. So picture this. Romantic candles, dinner for 2, some slow music setting the mood, and then bam, in walks Mom, passing the breadsticks, Dad offering some helpful advice, and your sister making sure you've got your sunscreen packed. That's right, folks. Nothing says romance like sharing your honeymoon suite with your entire family. And that's a true story. That is a true story of Abby's honeymoon. I'm not kidding. Cracks me up. But seriously, that's the kind of love Amy was surrounded by. And that's the kind of love she carried with her all her life. She lived it, she breathed it, and she shared it with everyone around her. But life wasn't all sunshine and roses for Amy. Nobody's life is, right? She went through some real tough storms, guys. The storms that would have taken down anyone less strong than her. When Amy was just 14, she collapsed on a softball field, and that moment changed everything. It was the start of a lifelong battle with her health. Doctors eventually figured out that what was going on, and they diagnosed her with something called antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, or better known as APLS. Now, this is a rare blood clotting disorder, and it comes with some serious risk. Very serious, like strokes and miscarriages. This wasn't just a small bump in the road. This was something that was going to shape the rest of her life. And if that wasn't enough, not long after that, Amy got hit with another diagnosis, lupus, and the kind that mimics multiple sclerosis. That's a chronic autoimmune disease that affects your central nervous system, and that includes your brain and your spinal cord. From there, Amy was on a tough, painful road that no teenager should ever have to face. We're talking surgeries, chemotherapy, folks, blood transfusions, and hospital stays. Way too many hospital stays. It seemed like every time she got back on her feet, something else knocked her down. And to top it all off, she was in a pretty bad car wreck not long after, adding more treatments, more doctor visits to her already full plate. But if you knew Amy, you'd know that none of this ever broke her spirit. Every time life hit her with something new, she didn't back down. She kept pushing forward, like she always did. Now, I want to share something personal here, and it's not something I talk about much, but it feels kind of important I do share. I have something called fibromyalgia. It's a chronic autoimmune illness, and let me tell you, living with a chronic illness like Amy and I do, it's a battle. It's one of those things you can't really understand unless you're living it yourself. It's like childbirth, okay? I know my mom listeners out there can relate. That's the kind of pain that only a mother can truly understand. But hey, that pain does eventually pass. With chronic pain, exhaustion, that never lets up. It never passes. It wears you down in ways that's way far beyond physical. It's your own body, and it's waging war against itself, day in and day out. There's days when just getting out of bed feels like climbing a mountain. And even the simplest things take everything you got. But the hardest part isn't the pain. Nope, the hardest part is how it messes with your mind. It makes you feel trapped in your own skin. And you feel guilty for missing out on so many things, for canceling plans, for not being able to do what everyone else is doing. That's why having a support system is everything, whether it's family, friends, or even a small group of people who just get it. It makes all the difference. And that's exactly what Amy had. Her family was her rock. They stood by her through every surgery, every hospital stay, and every setback. Now that's the kind of support you can't put a price on. It's what keeps you going when your body's telling you to give up. And Amy, she never gave up. She kept fighting because that's who she was. But here's the thing about Amy. She also never let her illness define her. Even when this is funny, even when she lost her toe during one of her surgeries, she didn't let that slow her down. In true Amy fashion, she cracked a joke saying something like, I might not have a toe now, but I'm painting that little sucker. It's getting pretty too. And I just love that. I love that about her, that attitude. It's truly, honestly, guys, that's the kind of resilience that I can only hope to have myself. I think of Amy's story now. When I have pain, when I'm stuck in bed, I think of that gal. And that's what makes her story so inspiring to me. Okay, let's move on. Her strength wasn't just about surviving. She made it a point to find joy. This is very, very important and special. And I can relate to how hard that is when life was throwing every bit of darkness your way. I mean, think about it. She went through things that would knock most of us down for good. But somehow, that lady, she always found a way to keep moving forward. Now, despite everything she was dealing with, Amy graduated from high school, and not only that, she earned her degree as a dietitian. She had plans on her career in helping others. She poured everything she had into the people around her. Now, Amy's story, it's not picture perfect. She faced devastating losses, 2 miscarriages that just totally broke her heart. I mean, that kind of pain never goes away. By then, by some twist of fate, Suri came into her life. And from that moment, everything just clicked for her. Amy and Suri, whether they were blood related or not, because yes, Suri was adopted, it didn't matter. It felt like they were always meant to be mother and daughter. It was like destiny brought them together, you know? Even when Amy's health started to get worse, she fought. Oh, she fought hard to create moments of happiness, good memories. She fought to be there for Suri and her family. But the truth is, sometimes, no matter how much love you give or how hard you fight, life still throws its worst at you. And that's exactly what happened to Amy in September of 2017. After everything Amy had been battled through, the darkness found her again. And this time, it took her from the people she loved. It was the morning Pam Nelson will never forget. She was at work at her doctor's office when her phone rang. Now, it was Amy's number calling, so of course Pam answered right away, expecting to hear her daughter's voice. But instead, it was the mother of Amy's boyfriend. Her words colder than ice. "Amy passed away in her sleep last night," she said. And just like that, Pam's world shattered into a million pieces. The shock of those first words, my gosh, it must have hit Pam like a tidal wave. But then what came next chilled her even deeper. She died because they took her pills away. Oh my gosh, can you even imagine? I mean, getting a call like that out of the blue, you're at work? One moment, your world's already falling apart with the news of your daughter's gone. And then you're hit with something that throws everything into question. What? Pam could barely understand what she was hearing. I mean, the weight of all this just knocked her flat. She dropped to the ground, overwhelmed with shock and grief, and she was so confused. I mean, it's every parent's worst nightmare. One minute, everything's fine, just another day, and the next, your whole life is ripped apart in a blink of an eye. Once Pam could pull herself together, she didn't waste a second. She got in her car and she drove straight to Amy's apartment in New Straitsville. Now, folks, normally that drives about 30 minutes from Pam's job in New Lexington. But in that kind of panic, I'm sure every single minute felt like a lifetime. I want you to picture the drive. You people that know Perry County, and you know it's bad, but it's a winding road through the hills of Perry County with sharp turns and tight corners all the way. It's the kind of roads where all you see are trees and hills and maybe the occasional farmhouse. There's no big highways and there's no traffic, just rural country. Nothing but your own thoughts to keep you company. Can you imagine? I bet Pam's mind must have been racing. I bet she was fighting the urge to just floor that damn car to get it there faster. But I bet she was trying to keep control of her car on those twisting roads because they are so dangerous. Can you imagine the panic? She had to get to her daughter, but all the while, trapped in her own head, playing out every worst scenario possible. In the middle of this, Pam had to make the hardest phone call of her life. She had to call her other daughter, Abby. Her voice was trembling and broken. She told her, "Amy's gone." Just like that, Abby's world fell apart too. She rushed to New Straitsville to meet her mother, both of them about to be faced something they couldn't even prepare for. They had no idea what they were about to walk into. When Pam and Abby arrived at Amy's apartment, they were met with absolute chaos. What they saw wasn't something any mother or sister should ever have to experience. Chief Andy Lubb and his nephew, Auxiliary Officer Zane Lubb, well, they were there representing the New Straitsville Police Department. But that's not what caught Pam's attention first. What she noticed right away were the people inside Amy's apartment. Strangers. People who had no business being there were in Amy's home. And guess what they were doing? They were cleaning, folks. Not grieving. Not comforting Pam and Abby in their worst moment. No. They were scrubbing down the apartment like they were trying to erase what happened. These people were the mother and friends of Amy's boyfriend. And they were actually wiping away what could have been crucial evidence. Oh my, can you even imagine what that must have felt like for Pam and Abby? Their worst fears, the chaos, the confusion, and this sickening feeling that something was being covered up. This was all happening right in front of their eyes. They thought this was not a tragic death. Something darker had happened. And now any hope of finding out what really went down was disappearing with every swipe of a rag. Oh, I gotta tell you folks, if that had been me, I would have lost it right then and there. I know it. To walk into that, to see people wiping away potential evidence, that's infuriating. Crime scenes need to be locked down and secure. Any scene like that. But instead, here were people cleaning. And the police, they just stood by outside letting it happen? So what really happened in that apartment? I want to know why on earth they were letting people clean up before they started an investigation. From the very beginning, I'll tell you why. Because at the very beginning, the police dismissed Amy's death as just another overdose. They failed Pam and Abby. They failed to secure the scene, and they failed to gather evidence, and they failed to see Amy's death as anything other than a tragic accident. But Pam and Abby knew better. Their gut instincts were screaming at them that something terrible had just happened to Amy. This wasn't just a peaceful passing in her sleep. And then, as if things couldn't get worse, Pam's poor heart broke into a million more pieces. As he prepared to remove Amy's body from the apartment, Pam saw the bruises. Her daughter's face was marked with deep, dark bruises. Her hands had defensive wounds like she had tried to fight back, and there was blood seeping from her mouth and nose. "Oh my God!" Pam cried out. She was unable to hold back the shock and grief. "What have they done to you?" This wasn't the peaceful death they had described on the phone. Not at all. This was something much, much darker. And the Nelsons, they weren't about to let Amy's death get swept under the rug. No way. They were determined to find out what really happened to her. But from the very start, it felt like the authorities were dragging their feet, stonewalling them at every turn. Even with the clear signs of trauma, the bruises, the defensive wounds, the blood, the police hesitated, brushing it off as just another drug overdose. I mean, can you imagine the frustration? You're standing there looking at your daughter's body, covered in bruises, and the people who are supposed to help you, they're acting like it's nothing. And here's the thing. Pam wasn't the only one seeing it, okay? The coroner himself, the one person whose words should have carried weight, he raised serious red flags right there at the scene. He told Pam straight up that things didn't add up. Yet, despite those concerns, no real investigation was launched. I mean, can you folks imagine how it feels knowing that every minute that passes is just another step further from finding justice for your daughter? The Nelsons were desperate for help. They begged for BCI, that's the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, to step in. Pam confronted law enforcement, insisting they do their job, but she felt deep in her gut that she was fighting a system that wasn't listening. And I've been there, not in the same way, but I know what it's like to have to fight to be taken seriously. It wears you down. Now imagine doing that while you're grieving the loss of your child. It's like adding insult to injury, and it's not right. Pam and Abby were begging for them to investigate, and instead they hit them with something that still blows my mind. The police actually said, quote, "Just let everyone continue to think it was an overdose," unquote. Seriously, can you believe that crap? Law enforcement's actual plan was to let the public think Amy's death was just another statistic of addiction. And why? What could be their reasoning? What possibly could be behind this? Well, they didn't want the people involved, Amy's killers, to, quote, "get their story straight," unquote. For crying out loud. Can you even imagine hearing that as a grieving mother? You're fighting tooth and nail for answers. And the people who are supposed to help you are more concerned with playing mind games with these suspects than finding out the truth. That's beyond belief. Pam wasn't going to let them brush this under the rug. Oh no, she knew what happened to Amy. There were bruises, there was blood, and she saw the defensive wounds. It wasn't speculation, it was a fact. And they had the nerve to tell her, just let people think it was an overdose. Oh, if that would have been me, I'd been furious. How do you let the truth get buried like that? Oh, how do you let people believe Amy's death was just another OD when you knew damn well it wasn't? Oh, it gets worse. I posted about this episode in a Facebook group, Perry County, trying to bring awareness. And even now, 7 years later, someone commented to me saying that they thought it was an overdose. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. 7 years down the road, and people still are in the dark. And Pam wasn't asking for the impossible. She just wanted justice for her daughter. And instead, she got hit with this cold, calculated response that felt more like a cover-up than anything else. I can't even imagine how that felt. It's heartbreaking, and it really pisses me off at the same time. The family and Amy deserve so much better. But the Nelsons, they weren't about to back down. They were furious, and rightfully so. Weeks had passed since Amy's death. Weeks where the apartment had been cleaned. Evidence was destroyed, and the witnesses, they were left unchallenged. Pam might have been shaken, but she didn't back down. She looked the authorities straight in the eye, and she told them exactly what she thought of their so-called plan. What do you mean? It's already been weeks. They've had plenty of time to get their story straight. They've been together, talking about it, erasing the truth for days, and you did nothing. See, Pam wasn't just fighting for her daughter's justice. She was fighting against a system that had failed her, and she wasn't about to give up. If everything the Nelsons had gone through wasn't enough of a gut punch, the silence from the authorities only added to their heartbreak. I can't even imagine fighting for my daughter's truth, and the very people who are supposed to help me are stonewalling at every turn. Okay, folks, we're going to take a quick break right here. Take it and get you a drink, check your email, but hurry back. Okay, we're back. Let's jump right back in. Pam and her family went to prosecutor Joseph Plow in March of 2018, and they were thinking, okay, this is it. This is the moment where they'll finally come out and say where it was homicide and not an overdose. But no, instead, they got hit with another cold and heartless response. He didn't even want to make any statements because he might have to prosecute the case. I mean, I get it. Sure, from a legal standpoint, maybe he was just being cautious. But here's the thing. There's an entire community out there still believing that Amy was just another person lost to drugs. And her family's out here fighting tooth and nail to make sure people know that she was murdered. And it's enough to make anyone lose faith in the system. How frustrating that must have been. Years. It took years before the media finally started reporting the truth. If I were in Pam's shoes, I seriously doubt if I could have held it together. Okay, let's be real. Knowing me, knowing myself, I would have lost my damn mind by then. I would have, but that just goes to show you how broken the system can be sometimes. When the people who are supposed to help you, they're more concerned with covering their own backs than you are with telling your family's truth. It's just no wonder families feel like they fight these battles alone. So here we are. Amy's memory was tainted. They were tainted by those whispers that just wrote her off as another victim of addiction, instead of the mother and the daughter and the fighter that she really was. The silence wasn't just painful for Pam and Pete. It was gut-wrenching. I mean, imagine knowing the truth about your daughter's death, while the people responsible, they're just out there carrying on like nothing ever happened. They're just blending into the background. No fear, no consequences. They're just going on with their lives like nothing ever happened. While you're stuck with this giant hole in your heart. Every day that passed without the truth coming out, that was like another gut punch for the Nelson family. And here's the thing. It wasn't now just about getting justice for Amy. It was about making sure the people who took her life didn't get to rewrite the whole damn story. Because every time someone tried to brush off Amy's death as just another overdose, it hit her family all over again. They were fighting. They were fighting to make sure everyone knew what really happened. And they were fighting alone. Even in the deepest grief, Pam and Abby, they weren't going to let their killers just walk away like nothing happened. They weren't going to let them twist the truth. They weren't going to let them rewrite the story and get off scot-free. No way. They better keep looking over their backs. The Nelsons refused to be silenced, so they did what they had to do. They took matters into their own hands. Pam and Abby started telling Amy's story to anyone who had listened. Local media, community groups, even random folks around the neighborhood. They'd just start talking to them, telling Amy's story. If you've driven through Perry County, you've probably seen one of those signs about Amy's case. You can't miss them. They're big, they're bold, and they're screaming for attention. And those signs, they're more than just words on a board. They're messages of frustration, desperation, and it's a powerful demand for justice. Every time you see one, it's a reminder that Amy's family hasn't quit. They're still in this. They're still in this fight, still pushing for answers. Pam and Abby made sure that Amy's face and her name and the injustice surrounding her murder, that it stays out front and center, right where everyone can see. Okay, let's get back to the story. The Nelsons, they weren't going to let Amy's killers hide behind their lies any longer. That whole idea of giving the killers time to get their story straight. Yeah, Pam and Abby, they weren't worried about that anymore. That time had passed. The authorities had already given them enough time to piece together whatever lies they needed. While they sat around doing nothing, Pam and Abby, they started making moves. Now, they were laser focused, determined to cut through the noise and break down the lies that had built up around Amy's death. Through our investigation here at Death, Lies, and Alibis, we've been digging deep into Amy's case, and there's one name that keeps coming up, and that's Jeremiah Spears. Some may know him as Jakey Boy. Yeah, I'm not going to use that name. This guy's got a history, and it's far from pretty. He's caught our attention for a reason, and the more we dig, the more it becomes clear why he's the center of the story. Spears wasn't just some passing figure in Amy's life. No, his role was much bigger, much darker. He supposedly had a big influence on her, and from what we've dug up, it seems like their connection went way deeper than anyone realized, because they didn't just cross paths by chance. He became her boyfriend, and they started using drugs together in July of 2016. And from that point on, Amy's life took a nosedive. Everything she worked so hard to hold together, the foundation she'd built for herself, it all started to crumble. That strong, vibrant woman who had been fighting her health battles with strength was suddenly pulled into something so dark, something she couldn't climb out of. And here's where it gets real disturbing. It didn't take long to realize that Spears wasn't just a passenger on this ride. He was behind that wheel. He wasn't just standing on the sideline in Amy's life. He was the one allegedly pushing her down the dangerous road. This is where the story starts to fall apart, and trust me, we're trying to keep digging until we uncover every piece of it. But there's more to this than what we know right now, and we're still investigating, and we're hoping the truth opens up. As we keep digging into Amy's life, the story gets way darker than anyone could have ever guessed. Spear wasn't just some guy passing through. He was right in the center of everything, supposedly, allegedly, pulling all the strings. And this wasn't just your run-of-the-mill control either. He allegedly took over her finances, decided when and if she could take her meds, and even cut off her own family. For someone like Amy, already dealing with serious health issues, that kind of control can be a nightmare. But of course it didn't stop there. Allegedly, Spears reportedly threatened Amy and her family, keeping her in a constant state of fear. She wasn't just dealing with her health problems anymore. She was scared of the very person who should have had her back. What really gets me is how many people knew something was up. Multiple folks saw what was going on with Amy. Some saw it firsthand, while others, they were tangled up in this twisted mess of control and manipulation themselves. This wasn't just a bad relationship going wrong, okay? This was a crime, plain and simple. Control, drugs, desperation. It all came together in a worst possible way, and it cost Amy her life. The deeper we go, the more clear it becomes. Amy wasn't just unlucky. She was trapped. Trapped in a situation where her freedom, her safety, Her life was being stolen from her bit by bit. And in the end, it all came crashing down in the worst way. It's that classic heartbreaking pattern you see with abusers. Isolating their victims, controlling them until they've broken them down completely. And what's even more disturbing is that Piers wasn't doing this all by himself. Allegedly, there were other people in Amy's life. People who saw her struggling, saw how vulnerable she was, and used it for their own damn benefits. They took advantage of her when she was already fighting an uphill battle. This whole thing was a ticking time bomb, and in the end, Amy's the one that paid the price for it. But we're not letting her story disappear. The Nelsons are going to keep pushing, keep uncovering every piece of this until they have the full picture. And Amy deserves that. She deserves for the truth to come out. And we're going to make sure it does. No one's getting away with burying what really happened. All right, let's take a minute here to break down Spears' history. This will get you a better look at this guy because it paints a pretty clear picture of what kind of person we're dealing with here. And it's no wonder he's our person of interest in Amy's case. Back in 2020, Spears was hit with charges for drug abuse and possession of drug instruments right there in Perry County. But instead of facing any real consequences, he slipped through with just a fine and a warning. No real lessons learned. It was basically a slap on the wrist. And then we fast forward to the next year, 2021, and things get even more serious then. He pleads guilty to 4 counts of trafficking heroin. Yes, heroin. That shows just how deep he was into this criminal world by that point. And he wasn't some small-time player. He was getting involved in the heavy stuff. He was dealing it. And here's where it gets really wild. While he's serving time for those offenses, Spears gets involved in a jailhouse riot. This wasn't just some minor scuffle. On September 16th, 2021, 4 years almost to the day of Amy's murder, Spears and 8 other inmates caused a full-on mass disturbance at the Southeastern Ohio Regional Jail in Nelsonville. It led to charges of aggravated riot, vandalism, and inducing panic. I mean, here's this guy, he wasn't even causing trouble on the outside. He was stirring up the shit behind bars, too. I mean, he's not just some run-of-the-mill criminal. This is somebody actively involved in serious crimes, even while locked up. And the kicker is, despite all that, Spears' social media activity recently, I checked it out, it suggests he might be back around Perry County. And he's acting like nothing's changed. No remorse, no sign that he's turned his life around. It's just the same story with this guy. And it's no surprise he's still at the center of Amy's case. Because the more we dig, the more disturbing it gets. Now, I've reached out to Spears for his side of the story. So far, no response. But if you know him or if he's listening, we want to hear from you. You've got a chance to share your side of things. Contact us. Let's talk. There's always 2 sides to every story, and we're ready to hear yours. Now, every day it gets clear that the people around Amy during her final days, they knew way more than they were letting on. They weren't just mixed up in a few bad decisions. They were deep in the world of drugs and in trafficking and who knows what else. And Amy, poor Amy, was right there in the middle of all this chaos. Now, back in 2017, if you remember, that's when the pill epidemic was out of control. Doctors were handing out pill meds like candy, and Amy wasn't an exception. She was getting 450 Percocet 30s every month. Every 30 days, 450 Percocets. And that's on top of Oxycontin, methadone, Klonopin, which is like, that's like a Xanax, and Lyrica. That's tough. I was on it. I mean, think about that for a second. That's a ton of heavy meds for anyone to handle, let alone somebody already dealing with a chronic illness. And then, out of nowhere, they cut her damn scripts down to 30 pills a month. No warning. They didn't help her taper off. No support. Just, here, good luck. Can you imagine that kind of withdrawal she must have gone through? Because that's not just physical pain. That's mental torture, especially when you're already hurting. And then here, you've got Spears allegedly using her meds to control her, and I'm sure they were selling them. When that supply got cut, oh my goodness, you know things had to get real tense real quick. Her family, they dug deeper, and it became clear that Amy just didn't die from an overdose, guys. And she didn't just trip or fall over a cord like they tried to make it seem. This was way bigger than that. This was about control, manipulation, and ultimately, murder. Amy's death wasn't some tragic accident. It was a result of something far darker, and it looks like Spears was allegedly at the center of it all. This wasn't just about addiction. It was about power, control, and violence. And that's real talk, folks. Amy had been brutally beaten. The official cause of death was blunt force trauma. And this isn't some theory. It's there in black and white, right on the autopsy report. It's on the death certificate, blunt force trauma. Homicide. But her body told the real story. The bruises, the blood, the defensive wounds, everything painted a clear picture of violence. This wasn't a peaceful passing in her sleep. Amy fought for her life. Well, she tried to fight back, but in the end, she didn't escape the violence that ultimately took her life. And yet, despite everything the autopsy revealed, the police had already fumbled the investigation. So by the time that the report came out, any evidence that could have pointed to her killers, it was gone. The crime scene had been scrubbed clean. Witnesses weren't questioned properly, and crucial clues were lost forever. I mean, it's heartbreaking. From day one, the investigation was botched, and with that, any chance of justice, it started slipping through the fingers right then and there. The system let Amy down when she was alive, and now it was failing her all over again after her death. But the Nelsons refused to let it end there. They are determined to get justice for Amy, no matter what it took. And there was no way they were going to let her killers roam free after everything she had gone through. Despite the constant setbacks, despite the system letting them down time after again, the Nelsons refused to back down. They could have easily given up, let the failures of the system wear them out, but that wasn't in their nature. And little by little, their persistence started to pay off. People began to listen, and eventually, the case was turned over to the BCI. Finally, someone with real investigating power was taking a closer look. It was a small win, but it was something. But the heartbreaking truth is so much has already been lost. The mishandling of the case in those crucial early days, it meant vital evidence was destroyed, and key leads went cold. And the Nelsons, they knew this, but it didn't stop them from fighting. It only fuels their determination. They're not going to let Amy's story end with failure, and they're going to keep pushing, keep demanding answers, and keep fighting until justice is served. They will never stop seeking justice for Amy Jo, and we won't either. Folks, here's my take on this whole situation real quick. I don't personally know Jeremiah Spears or anyone directly involved in Amy's life, but let me tell you, I know the lifestyle. I've seen it play out firsthand, and trust me, it's just not about the drugs. It's the whole toxic, abusive environment that always seems to come with it. Domestic violence has its own kind of destruction. And when you throw it in the mix with addiction, it's deadly. And the abusers, they're not just hooked on drugs, they're hooked on that control. They'll do anything to keep their grip tight, whether it's through violence, threats, or emotional torment. It's not just physical. It's the constant verbal attacks, the threats, the isolation. They take everything away, freedom, your independence. They control who their partner talks to, where they go, and how they live. It's terrifying. And once you're caught in that cycle, breaking free feels impossible, guys. And the abusers, they don't care who gets hurt, as long as they stay in control and they get what they want. People like Amy, already vulnerable from health struggle or emotional battles, they get trapped. In Amy's case, it didn't just hurt her, it took her life. But Amy's story isn't over, not by a long shot. There's truth buried out there, tangled in lies and mistakes, and covered in way too much silence. If Amy's story hits home for you, don't stay silent, speak up. Every voice matters, every bit of awareness, every action moves this fight forward. We can't let Amy's name fade away. It's on us to bring the truth to light and see that justice is finally served. All right, and anyone mentioned in this podcast is presumed innocent until found guilty in a court of law. Okay, folks, now for my little disclaimer. I'm not a professional of any kind. I gather and research very public information, and I present it to you for you to do your own research and form your own opinions. And that's it for this episode of Death, Lies, and Alibis. We hope that by shining a light on these local cold cases, we have sparked something within you, our listeners. Because the truth is, solving these cases will take more than just our words. It's going to require the dedication and collective efforts of the entire community. Don't forget to hit the follow button on the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. To learn more about how to get your case featured on the show or to get instant access to case files, reports, and many free resources, go to our Facebook group, Death, Lies, and Alibis, and join today. You can also email us at deathliesandalibis@gmail.com. As always, be safe, stay alert, and never stop seeking justice.